Or we could have just the audio on a YouTube video with like a collage of pictures.
Like what they do at funerals and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, this is
nature scenes, and we're talking about music careers.
Wait. Or we could just stick a logo up there.
Or like Thomas Kincaid paintings.
I don't know who Thomas Kincaid is.
You don't know who Thomas Kincaid is?
Okay, pet peeve of mine, just when I say something very clearly and then they repeat it back at me. I hate that.
You hate that?
I hate it.
Do you
But
hate
I also
it?
don't know who Thomas Kincaid is, no. Sorry to all you Thomas Kincaid folks out there. Apparently I'm sitting across from one of them.
I need to show you a Thomas Kincaid painting.
I mean, it better change my life. Because if it's like paintings, I like paintings plenty. They're great. I'd rather listen to music, you know.
Music?
Not this music.
You hear what he's saying?
Yes. I hear the knick-knack paddywhack. This is ridiculous.
I'm a guy of many tastes.
In take 36, we had a really bad start.
Are we rolling?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Why don't I ever know when we're rolling?
I don't know. So anyways, what I was saying, we had some microphone issues, but we're not doing the countdown anymore because we basically don't want to get sued by the richest podcaster in the whole entire universe. So,
do you think he has copyrighted counting?
Dude, I don't even know what you can copyright, to be honest.
Right.
I also know that more things have, or, you know, if you think about what a chord progression is, it really is just numbers.
Right.
And people have copyrighted chord progressions.
That's ridiculous.
Which is very weird.
It's absolutely ridiculous because there's only 7 chords if you don't count chromatic chords.
Yep.
So
yeah, you're very limited to how many notes in the Western world you can use.
Right.
Because any notes outside of what the Western world uses kind of sound funky anyway.
Yeah, they're not right.
Yeah.
They're just not right.
It's just wrong. That's
right.
what it is. So.
Right.
Okay, so last week we talked about basically what does a career for a musician look like. And we want to just continue this. Probably a 3-part series, to be honest, just because there's so many things to talk about. We talked about how it's a myth that musicians are just like inevitably poor people.
Right.
Which we own the fact that it's promulgated by the musical community. It's almost like a badge of honor to be poor for a lot of musicians.
Isn't that weird?
It's a very strange thing. It's almost I don't know. I don't get it. I'm glad that I don't get it. You know when you don't understand people sometimes and then you just feel blessed because you don't understand people?
Right.
That's how I feel on that front.
Yeah, being poor is not something to aspire to. I don't understand it. It's not like money is everything, but it's something.
Right.
You know?
Everything I've ever heard about money is it just shows who you really are. Like it shows your true colors. If
right.
Given the circumstance that you have a lot of it, right? If you don't have a lot of it, you're kind of powerless, I guess. Which I think, power is also one of those things that is kind of like an icky word to some people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, if you think about what power can be, power can feed the whole world, You're not going to take somebody who's super poor and has no money and has no power and feed a bunch of people or, solve the issues that we're facing today. If you think about somebody who's really going to make an impact and really going to do something, it's going to be somebody who has money and has power.
Right.
Now, what's also, causing what's going on in Venezuela right now? A guy who has all the money and who has all the power. So it's just going to take who you are as an individual and blow it up times like 100. So.
Yeah.
Depending on how much of it you have. So
that's the struggle in mankind is over power and influence.
Yeah. So I think in this episode, specifically, we should talk about. We've gotten past what does it look like. I know that was one of the big questions we hit was what does a music career look like. I think that you'll be really, really good at this. Without going into too much detail, you do have real estate,
Right.
which is one form of creating income. So let's talk about, in this episode specifically, let's talk about ways that you can supplement your income so that you can perhaps alleviate some of the financial stress of life in general. Because I know for me, I'm very financially, I say very, I know a lot about finance and stuff like that. Like the financial world is not something that's foreign to me. I can hold a conversation. I don't shy away from any kind of financial conversations at all. It doesn't matter what career path you go into. It's good to have multiple streams of income.
Right.
Right. So why don't you kind of tell us what when you started getting into real estate and how you did that, and then books that we can read on that, and the ways that we can educate ourselves financially as musicians so that we don't have to just rely on our income from teaching and gigging.
Right. So let's see. I started a marketing business in 2006, right out of grad school. And that was just because, there was a lot of reasons why I ventured into that. Some of it was just because I felt like I could make some extra money.
Right.
And it was interesting because it was the first time in my life that I started reading books on business and finances. And I started to come to some realizations about things like retirement and the idea of retirement and, what, I don't know fully what it takes to retire. I have an idea because I haven't retired.
Right.
But I do know that people need to start thinking about that from the beginning, which is really weird for a college graduate when you're starting to get into the professional world to start, you get your first job and now you're going to think about retirement. But that's an important life lesson. You always want to think of the kind of the end in mind.
Yep.
And so I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad that opened up my eyes as far as the differences between people who are, the premise of the book is that the guy who wrote it, his name is Robert Kiyosaki. And he had two father figures in his life. He had his own father, who was highly educated. I think he was a teacher, and died broke.
Right.
And then his best friend Mike's dad, who was not very educated, was actually poorer than his own father when he met Mike, and died like a billionaire. And the differences between how these two guys thought. And it's a fascinating book. I think every single person should read it, because it gives you an idea of, you could say it's a success mindset or an abundance mindset. But success financially happens in your head first.
Yep.
And we've seen that with our colleagues. I can think of someone right off the top of my head who will go nameless, who does just as much work as we do, and this person is barely making it. And Ben and I have just been scratching our heads forever. It's like, how is this person just barely making it when they do equal work as us and we're fine?
Right. And that goes to your point, is it's success. And I've read so many books just like you have on just personal development and success and all this kind of stuff. Every single book talks about the mentality more than it talks about, actions, just giving straight up actions like, oh, do this, do this, do this. A lot of these books talk about what goes on in your brain and how you view the world.
Right.
Which is, it's everything. Tony Robbins talks about, 80% attitude, 20% action, which that's consistent with, some people say 90-10. And I want to highlight something that you said, and that was, you become rich in your mind first, and then you start to come. A lot of people think, oh, once the riches come to me, then I will start to think like a rich person. It's like, no, you have to be. Both Robert Kiyosaki and Tony Robbins, and I'm sure, Gary Vee, those kind of guys, they all have these moments where they're living out of their car and making nothing. And now they're multimillionaires. Tony Robbins was making $38,000 a year one year, and then the next year, which if you don't know, that's not a lot of money. And the next year he was a multimillionaire.
Right.
A year later, right? So,
but it's that same reason why people who oftentimes win the lottery, it's the worst thing to ever happen to them because, they get all sorts of money that comes in. But because they don't understand money, a few years later, they're usually filing for bankruptcy.
Right.
It's very interesting. It's also on the other end, if you talk about, without getting too political here, but taxation. We talk about wanting to tax the wealthiest among us more. Well, the reason why they're wealthy is because they understand money. And they understand, they understand it better than most people. And if you raise taxes on them, guess what? They know how to move money around so that they're not going to be paying the taxes you think they're going to be taking, or that they're going to be paying. And it's going to fall on people that are in middle class or lower class, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's a point that I try to make with people. Again, like I don't like to ever get into like hardcore political discussions where you're like yelling back and forth because that's very not constructive. But what you do, these people that say, oh well, they just keep saying, tax the rich, tax the rich, tax the rich. I'm like, when you're talking about a multi-billionaire, they know so much about the way money moves. Mm-hmm. They never ever will receive that taxation. You know what I mean? Until until the government comes in with a gun and says you will pay this, and you're not allowed to make your businesses charge more. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this. And some people honestly advocate for that, and I think that's terrifying.
Yeah, that's what they did in Russia. The USSR. That's how you create a communist utopia. Yep. You take from people who have and give it to people who don't. Which goes back to the power struggle.
I was reading the Gulag Archipelago, and they had this word. I can't remember exactly what the word was, but it was like they called it. It was such a negative connotation, but they called people who owned or aspired to own businesses this really negative word. Like you were looked at as like, I think the actual definition of the word was enemy of the people. Right. And you were seen as an enemy of the people if you aspired to more, because then you weren't on the equal playing field anymore. Right.
Which, I think there's some things that have got to be cleared up for people financially in order for them to do well. And one of them has to be that profit is okay. Because you have money in your pocket does not mean that you are a good person or a bad person. Right. What it does is like Ben said, is it increases your influence on things. And so if you're a really good person, more money makes you even better. If you're a really bad person, more money makes you worse. Right. That's all it does. But profit itself is not evil. It's actually good because it inspires you to be better. And it inspires you to do what you need to do more effectively, so that you're hiring people to take different jobs, and it spurs the economy. Profit is good, right? And it's okay to want to increase profits as long as you are not taking from other people immorally. Right. There are two foundational books on money that I think they should be taught in school. And that's very few schools are not. But
that's a point I wanted to make earlier, real quickly. You will not find any of the books we're talking about here in your classes in school, in grade school. You're going to have to go seek it out. Unless I don't know about this school that you teach at.
Well, they do some, but not as. They could do more. The two books that I'm going to recommend. One was taught in the school that I'm at, I think. Okay. But they're by Adam Smith. So these are written in the early 1700s. One's called The Wealth of a Nation, and it is the It is the blueprint on capitalism, where it talks about the invisible hand of the market, and that is what the entire economic system in America is based on. And then the other one is Moral Sentiments. Same author, Adam Smith. And those books are meant to go together. In that, okay, Wealth of a Nation says we should be striving for profit, doing what we're doing better, and that's okay because it makes the economy better. And then the other book says, but you also need to be moral about how you do things. You don't want to steal from other people or take advantage of them. And when those two things work together, you have a system that works.
Right. And one of my favorite podcasters, who will also go nameless, he talks about the sheer consensual nature of capitalism as a system.
Right.
Which is, can you work at McDonald's and absolutely hate your job? Yes. Yeah. But who put pen to paper when you signed that contract? You did. Nobody put a gun to your head. Nobody said, you have to do this.
Right.
And just going back to what we were talking about earlier, if in your mind you say you don't understand, I have to do this because I'm blank, you're talking to a guy, like, at 23 years old, I had a degree in music. I couldn't start teaching private lessons until August, and I needed to make money in May. So did I cry about it? No, I didn't cry about it. I got a job as a janitor. I cleaned a 5,000 square foot building at night for $600 a month. I worked at Chick-fil-A for $8.50 an hour. I worked at Lowe's on the weekend as a cashier, and I worked at a daycare. And I taught one kid private lessons. So you can't come to me and tell me, and by the way, you know what I did? Financially, I did really well. Like, oh, well, you don't understand. I have kids. I have this. It's all limiting beliefs. And I always think of it this way. No matter it, and I thought of this while I was in that situation. Somebody has it way worse off than I do.
Right.
Yeah, I'm working 80 hours, 90 hours a week. Get over it.
Right.
Because, well, and here's the deal. Get over it and have a freaking light at the end of the tunnel that you're working towards.
Right.
But if you're just working 40 hours a week at McDonald's and poor pitiful me, nope. No, I don't feel sorry for you in the slightest. And by the way, a lot of the time, and there are some situations where this is not the case, but typically if you have children, you made the kid. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like you typically, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not underplaying what happens to people that in the other situation. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible thing that I could probably do a whole nother podcast on. But anyway, so when you're in this situation, I'm going to kind of steer us back to what you've been able to do to produce a secondary income, because I do want to talk about my secondary income and your secondary income, because they're two very different things.
Right.
So you got into real estate. Do you know what year you got your first real estate investment property? That's what they're classified as.
Well, so my wife and I, we got married in 2011. And
hopefully she's not listening.
Well, so okay, we were hoping to get married on 10/10/10 because honestly, you can just remember the anniversary better.
Yeah. And
just timing didn't work out. And so our anniversary is March 12th, 2011, which 3/12/11 is like, oh, that's not as easy numbers to figure out. So anyway, especially when you ask me how long we've been married, I'm like, okay, married in 2011. What year is it now? I'm a musician. Math is hard. So, 8 years. Okay. Anyway, so she bought her first house in 2008 during the housing collapse.
That's genius, by the way.
Yes. And one of the reasons why I feel like my wife and I were so perfect for each other is that we were on the same page from day one as far as real estate goes.
That's a side note for you guys looking to date.
Right. It was a 4-bedroom house. She lived in the master, and she rented out the other 3 bedrooms. And so essentially she was living there for free. And so, which was great. Mm-hmm. And then we got married. I eventually moved in there. And so we were living in that house with the other 3 bedrooms rented out, which is kind of a burden when you're married. But you know what? We're setting up our life. So we dealt with it.
Right.
And we were living for free.
Getting nuggets from Michael this morning.
Right. And then we bought, after that, we saved up. We bought a duplex in near the DFW airport, and we moved into one side of it and rented out the other side, and then rented out the master bedroom.
Which, if you're looking for more space, that is, if you want to have your own space, that's perfect.
Yeah.
You know?
I recommend to people all the time getting their life started, buy a duplex, live on one side, rent the other. You'll live for free, and you're getting to your empire started.
Right.
So we did that. Then we moved into another house, kept the duplex, rented out the side we lived in. So now we had the house, the duplex, and then a new house we're living in.
The darn music or the mic stand.
Right. And then we moved again to our current house, so then we had two houses that we're renting out, and then a duplex. And then we looked at the market and saw that housing prices went up. So we actually sold one of those houses. We're about to sell the other house.
So you sold your first house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're about to sell the second house, make a big profit on it, and then the idea is to just grow more real estate with it.
Yeah.
To put some numbers to it, each house probably nets about $400 to $600 in profit a month. And the way that works is that, people pay rent. They move in there, they pay rent. You use that rent that they pay you to pay down the mortgage that you take on the house, and then you keep the profit on top of that. And $400 to $600, so we'll say $500 average, is not slap your boss money. But if you get 10 houses, well, now you're making $5,000 a month. And $60,000 a year, and you're really not doing anything on a day-to-day basis. It's just rolling into your bank account,
right?
Which is pretty awesome. And there's some other side benefits and ways to make money with real estate. Another interesting benefit to real estate is that the tax laws in Congress and in Washington D.C. are written by people who own real estate,
right? And
so there's all sorts of legal ways to not pay taxes on that money, and so that $60,000 you're making in a year is more like, I can actually even tell you, let me pull up the calculator. So 60,000 divided by point, let's say you're at the 20% tax bracket, it's like earning $75,000 a year.
That's a good way to look at it. And anytime you hear, there's two types of people who haven't paid taxes. There's like your Al Sharptons who legitimately are like avoiding paying taxes on millions and millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Or you've got your President Trump's, who he's everybody knows him as the real estate mogul. And in real estate, that's where your tax loopholes are.
Right.
They call them tax loopholes. It's tax law. It's not a loophole. It's the law. So.
Right. So the idea behind real estate is that it's get rich slow. Okay. Which is better than get rich never. And I personally like a slow moving investment, because if it's slow to go up, it's also slow to go down.
Right.
And you don't lose your shirt. The stock market is I just don't trust because I can't control it. Right. I put $1,000 into the Apple stock. Well, I'm not running Apple. If Apple releases the next greatest technology, that stock could go up and I make money.
If you ever hear of the term 401k, that's a retirement plan that's based off the movement of the stock market.
Or mutual fund.
Mutual fund, yeah.
But if Apple does something stupid and their prices go down, I lose money, and I am not in control at all. It's just a complete gamble. So a lot of people do it. A lot of people are successful doing it. It's just not my thing. So so I just picked my thing.
Right, which is also important.
Yeah, and the way to get into real estate it's real simple. There's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon that I think is good to read. And it's about a little savings plan that you can put together where you put aside some money, and then you just want to slowly put that money into things that make you more money.
Yep.
And I took classes in it, which I think it would be stupid of anyone to buy any real estate without taking a class, because you can lose your shirt on a house.
Yep.
And even the most seasoned investors lose money sometimes. That's just the reality of it. But
Right, and if there was one method that definitely worked 100% of the time, everybody would do it.
everyone would do it, yeah.
Right. So quickly, I think we got about 5 minutes left.
Really?
Yes. Well, if my 8 o'clock shows up on time,
Okay.
then we have 5 minutes left. It's okay. We can span this over as many episodes as we want because this is fun. I like talking about this stuff.
Well, good. Good.
So, hopefully you like listening about it. If you don't, good luck. Anyway, so I heard this when I was very young, and there's two ways to make residual income, and everything we're talking about it's called either residual or passive. There's two ways to make money. Obviously, somebody could argue another way. It's either off of owning real estate or employing people, right? So Michael has done the real estate. Well, you're about to employ people, but I chose to go down the route of employing people. So right now I have, I think, 12 or 13 employees. For any of you Bernie people out there, I pay them $25 an hour. So how about that? Like a mic drop kind of thing. Throw the mic over there.
But he hates getting into politics.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the arguments I get into because I'm not like overtly political. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I'm not overtly political, but sometimes you got to call the bluff. Like if you're screaming about 15 an hour, we'll employ people and pay them 15 an hour, or 25 like I do. 20 to 25. So, anyways, long story short, you have a business, and it doesn't really matter what business it is, but you create enough income to where you can employ people who want the job, right? I didn't put a gun to any of my employees' head and say, you're going to work this job or else. They came to me. All of them came to me and said, hey, I want to work. Or I tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, do you want to work? And they said, yes. It's called a consensual relationship. You want what I got, I want what you got. Let's pay each other, either in labor or in money. So we can expound upon that in the next episode, and I would like to.
Okay.
And then we'll just keep rolling it into the next idea and the next idea until we've completely gassed everything that has to do with finance.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
Right.
So, anyways. My kid's here, so let's sign off.
Your kid's here.
My kid's here, yeah. I have kids. Like 80 of them. Scary.
That's a lot of kids.
No, I don't have that many anymore. All right. To be continued. Deuces.